Good evening to our fellow agents and advocates of health. I am Jam Ponce.
And I am Rem. We are your hosts for this evening, and we welcome you to Health Playlists. Let's assemble.
Tonight, we'll be hearing the perspectives of various health professionals from doctors as well as other allied health professionals who will share their experiences in their line of work during and before the COVID-19 pandemic.
But more than that, Health Playlists aims to raise awareness in the neglected healthcare problems and gaps in the Philippine healthcare system through the lens of all of our guest speakers lined up for tonight's show.
Exactly. This podcast is brought to you by the Asian Medical Students Association Philippines, together with AMSA UST, AMSA SOMA, and UPMSSR.
And of course, it would not be possible without all of our partner organizations, Advocates for Consciousness and Social Involvement Society of the Asian Medical Students Association from the Ateneo School of Medicine and Public Health.
You also have the Asian Medical Students Association for Eastern University, Nicanor Reyes Medical Foundation.
And let's not forget the Asian Medical Students Association, University of Perpetual Health, Dr. Jose G. Tamayo Medical University.
And also Asian Medical Students Association, University of the East, Ramon Magsaysay Memorial Medical Center Incorporated.
With Social Action Medical Students Association, Sanbeda.
Including the Sangawad Bicol University College of Medicine.
And of course, Sagip Bayan Student Group from the St. Luke's Medical Center College of Medicine, William H. Quasha Memorial.
We also have the Asian Medical Students Association, accentuating lives through service and advocacy.
And of course, Agile Service through reliable advocates, Guyas College of Medicine.
And also the Asian Medical Students Association, student advocates for public health and environment.
Asian Medical Students Association, West Visayas State University.
And let's not forget the De La Salle University Dasmariñas Free Medical Society.
And last but not the least, Philippine Nursing Students Association, Ateneo de Davao Chapter.
Rem, how are you feeling tonight?
Well, I am ecstatic tonight, Jam, because after all of the ACAD work, and of course we know, Jam, that it's very hard, all of this online med schooling, it really gives you
Exactly.
some draining. No, Zoom's very draining. So at the end of the day, you want to interact with people and perhaps interact with people outside of your line of work.
Yeah, it's very draining nowadays that we're on lockdown and we have to study everything online. We don't get to have like social interaction with people. And I think this is very important because we get to know each line of field, like not only as a doctor, but like as an EMT, psychologist, a doctor in the barrio. It's nice that we get to have like a perspective of each of our speaker so that we as future doctors could understand them better and work with them properly in the future. Diba, napaka-lucky talaga natin lahat dito tonight to be hearing a lot from our speakers na napakadaming speakers natin tonight actually, no?
Yeah, and I'm excited to actually talk about our roster of speakers for tonight because at the end of the day, we don't just want social interaction, we need social action.
Yeah.
Right?
So, napakatama, Rem. Ay, nako. So, let's now begin kasi I feel like everyone's excited kasi ako mismo excited na ako to hear from like our panel of speakers eh.
Oh, definitely. And I am so thrilled because our guest speakers for today will give us some light of their experiences, their challenges, as well as their triumphs in their chosen healthcare professions, especially in this great service during the pandemic.
From our physician, emergency medical technician, guidance counselor, physical therapist, and contact tracer, they will be given a set of guided questions for which they will answer, ranging from their professional experiences as well as their challenges encountered before and during the pandemic. After all, the speakers have presented We will then proceed to a Q&A section. We will also be allocating time for your questions here in Zoom. So without further ado, Rem, let us meet our first speaker for this podcast.
Thank you, Jam. Our first speaker is a graduate of a Bachelor of Science in Physical Therapy from Cebu Doctors University and has been a licensed physical therapist since 2016. He's a certified orthopedic manual physical therapist. During the national PRISAA last 27 to 2019, he was the PT of Region 7 and was a medical volunteer during the 30th Southeast Asian Games 2019. And he is also a licensed national volleyball team coach level 1. And most of all, a PT staff at Maayo Well. So let us welcome with our virtual round of applause, Mr. Gio Texon.
Thank you so much, Shrem, for that very wonderful introduction, and to Jam, who's looking very gorgeous tonight. Okay, so I'd like to thank you guys for the opportunity for allowing me to showcase, or rather, share my profession to the people who are listening out there, to the audience. So let's start with all the questions that was given to us earlier. So let's start with, how do we make people understand our field of work better? So nowadays, especially during this pandemic, and how we let people understand our field work better is through the use of social media, especially today that most of our work, or even you guys, your classes are being handled through Zoom, I guess, I presume as well. So through the power of social media, I think we could educate the people more on what the physical therapists can do. And as well, and I think when we're asked certain questions on what do physical therapists do, I think to name among those is we help people who have undergone stroke patients, who have undergone sports injuries. So as you can see, there are other famous posts that even Kobe Bryant had a very wonderful physical therapist to help him to perform better during his NBA career. So that's how we let people understand our field work better. So usually when we're dealing with patients as well, or even individuals, some of them usually ask, what do physical therapists can do? So when we ask these certain types of questions, there are also common stereotypes or misconceptions on what physical therapists can do. And I could give you five among those. And I'll be dealing first with the common misconception is that PTs are masseurs, or that people, physical therapists do massage. Um, how do we deal with this stereotype or misconception? First is we would take that, let's say, we would take that opportunity to educate the person more on how we could help them, even if they are not in pain or they are in pain. We don't badmouth them for not knowing, because here in the Philippines, we will all agree that our healthcare system is not that as good as the one in the United States of America or the other countries, considering that we are a third world country. So we take that opportunity to educate people more, so we don't badmouth them that what they know is just we are all just masseurs. And second is to those individuals who have undergone physical therapy themselves, especially to those they have their own set of bad experiences or maybe good, so that they even think that all PTs are the same. So I'd like to take that opportunity as well to inform that not all physical therapists are the same. We have the same, let's say, theory learning before in college. However, we also have our different types of creativity when we deal with patients. Um, we have our own set of ways on how we make our patient feel better, or let them live better through their movements. And next is, I think another misconception is that PT will ask you to stop what you do. I mean, what you love doing. So that's for me, that's a myth, because especially for me with regards to my patients, I usually use those things as a driving factor why people must go or experience physical therapy, even if they are not in pain, especially to those athletes who right now are still young. They don't feel any pain or injury as of the moment. So I'd like to take that opportunity to educate them. If they are doing something wrong with their body, eventually their body will give up, and then eventually they would be seeing us later on, which they could have prevented any types of injuries that could have been prevented if they had seek a professional help, or rather sought help from us. And next is another thing that is another misconception is, I think that's you have to be in pain for you to seek a physical therapist. I think this is one also in relation to that. Physical therapists are limited to hospital work. I'm not pretty sure with the other areas, but here in Cebu is that I feel like physical therapy is going well. It's because we are given more opportunities here to showcase our profession, especially during the pre-pandemic time. That there were lots of sports tournaments um, that the venue were held here. So there was a hiring of lots of physical therapists for the teams that were participating in the tournaments, and then not all of the players are experiencing pain, but rather they want to improve more. Because us physical therapists, I could claim this, that we are movement experts. We can help with regards to the athletes' performances, and also to those who are just working on their desks. We help them to be more productive as well. We want to prevent those back pains, upper back pains that they usually feel after a long periods of time of sitting down, facing the computer or facing the paperwork they've been dealing with the entire day. And also, if there is one most neglected health issue in line of my work, I think that would be with regards to us physical therapists. I think it would be the back pain, because especially when you're in the hospital field, there are lots of patients who would be having an assist coming from us. So would be having this what they call this type of assist that we like 50% of the assist is coming from us. So most of the weight of the patient are coming, I mean, rather, we are helping them uh, carry their weight, 50% of it. And also, I think, also with when you're doing the exercises, just imagine we're dealing with different kinds of patients every day, and then we're gonna, let's say, what they call this, present or perform it before they perform it. So the body is given a certain amount of stress, and imagine doing that for the entire shift of your work, let's say for 8 to 9 hours. It is really draining, and that would also lead to low back pain. And I think the most common health issue that is I see, or I notice with my patients as well, is I think it's with regards to their nutrition, especially the pandemic, because it is hard, especially to those who can't cook, because I think are also the modern day heroes, which you call are the food deliveries, the Grab, Food Panda. They've been helping us, especially to those who are afraid of going out. So yeah, I think the nutrition, because people would rather what do you call this, order food online rather cook on their own. And then because of the pandemic, our movement outside our homes are very limited, thus leading to people being inactive, not being able to go to the gym, doing their workout. However, there are also people who have managed their weight as well, doing their home workouts in their homes, like they even secure their own gym equipments, like their own dumbbells, or even like I could see some of my colleagues as well having their own what they call online coaching with regards to helping other people managing their weight or their health. So yeah, I think that's one of the most neglected health issue. And next is how did our profession adapt to the pandemic, and how did it contribute to the pandemic response? So earlier I said that some of my colleagues even offered, like through their Facebook pages, Facebook profiles, that they're doing online coaching. They want to help people achieve their goals, their body goals, especially today. Like summer is coming. I'm pretty sure like some of us like would still want to have that beach body, even though the movement is limited. Like not all could go to the beaches. However, yeah, I think being able to achieve that without having the real experience of going to the beach is also like hitting two birds with one stone. In preparing to the time that we can go out and visit the beaches or like go out hang out with friends, and it's also helping yourself as well to be more healthy because there are certain studies that exercises regular exercise rather could help prevent the occurrence of severe COVID symptoms. So yeah, because when we do exercise, we help our body to become um, more prepared for certain diseases or not rather diseases but illnesses or injuries to be more protective and well, yeah, when we do our exercise our body becomes more healthy because it's like a machine. Like when we do constantly work on the machine, we tune it up to be able to prevent those other problems that would occur. And also I think another health issue that I would like also to highlight here is especially to those individuals who are not really that active before the pandemic and we transition to this pandemic stage is that are their lab values because in our work during the peak of the pandemic I was assigned to the COVID testing team, so we were like assigned to the certain department that because there was a certain time that the rapid testing for the antibodies was required before a company would be able to open up. So most of their employees were asked to undergo the test, and also during their annual physical exam, like a lot of employees had their lipid profiles went up, went high, their sugar level, and so on and so forth. That is really alarming, especially they're really not that active. So yeah, that's how my friends also took advantage in how to help other people during this pandemic, and it has really helped. The pandemic has somehow raised the awareness on the importance of my profession today because people would I would see that oh physical therapists can do this can give us work exercises workouts programs that would help us what do you call this help us lessen those values in our lab like for example lipid profiles their lipid that is really high sugar levels. So yeah, and also with regards to this one, this has also helped us improve our skills in coordinating with other health fields I mean rather health professionals in our country, especially that we seek nutritionists dietitians because we're often somehow I mean not often but rather we somehow face problems that is beyond our scope, so that way we improve our skills in coordinating with different health professionals. So we refer them to nutritionists to doctors who are dealing more especially with those pain problems that are not really addressed with conservative treatments. So some of them would go to the to drug medications or even rather the invasive type of treatments to help them with their problems. And and I think the best practice or the great area to improve on the thing in our field is maybe yeah I think is to educate people more on what physical therapists can do. I believe our field is slowly raising its level. A lot are really knowing what physical therapists can do, but also if there are a lot of people knowing what PTs can do, there are also a lot of people here who still don't know what PTs can do. So I'd like to take this platform and this opportunity to let people know that we are more than just your so-called masseur. So yeah, kidding aside, so if there's one lesson I learned during this pandemic that can be applied to my profession is that I think it should be when we how we could coordinate or let's say apply the digital age to our profession because not everyone are fully confident in seeking out help through face to face through the clinics. Some would prefer having their consultation or assessment virtually, but it's also a challenge for us because some movements or some assessments cannot be done virtually but best but is best made when it's personally done. And if I were to summarize my experience or my learning during this pandemic into 4 to 5 words, I think I'd like to have it in 3 words. It's more of change is inevitable because if you refuse to change to the pandemic, if you'd like just want to stay in your comfort zone, like not allowing the digital age to be applied with our profession, you would not be able to share more your knowledge or the opportunity of what people can acquire from us being physical therapists. So yeah, I think that is that sums up my experience as a physical therapist.
Thank you so much, Sergio, for sharing your experiences with us. Truly, each healthcare worker works as a team in promoting health in each individual. And it is promising to note the roles to play in the healthcare system that prioritizes the needs of their patients more than themselves. And it's also good that, Sergio, like, really highlighted the work of a PT because it's a big misconception to the population, and it's good for them to hear more about it. Moving on to our second speaker tonight.
And now we are fortunate to invite our second speaker who received his Bachelor of Science in Psychology from the University of San Carlos, Cebu City in 2003. With his ardent desire for learning, he obtained his master's degree major in guidance and counseling from La Salle University, Ozami City in 2012, and later earned his Doctor of Philosophy major in clinical psychology in Silliman University last 2017. Since then, he has been practicing extensively as a registered guidance counselor for 8 years and as a registered psychologist for 3 years. Currently, he works as the guidance counselor 3 of Misamis Occidental National High School, where he handles and provides guidance and counseling services to the school community. He's also the proprietor of OroCare, psychological services located in Oroquieta City, where various referrals on clinical cases are handled. Known for his advocacies in mental health and well being, gender and development and peace, the all around type of advocacy, right? He also believes that truly prevention is much, much better than any intervention, probably even better than cure. Ladies and gentlemen, it is with great privilege to welcome Mr. Aldwin Murphy B. Queck.
Thank you very much for having me here in this health playlist in celebration of our World Health Day. Again, I am Aldwin Murphy B. Queck, a doctor of philosophy, major in clinical psychology. At the same time, a registered psychologist and a guidance counselor. Currently performing these two professions, a psychologist and at the same time a counselor. So, first, being a counselor. Being in a counselor, again, as counselor in a public school, a national high school under the Department of Education, with around 5,000 plus population of student learners, I provide guidance and counseling services mainly to the students, but also catering to the expressed psychological and mental health needs of teachers, parents, and other stakeholders. These guidance and counseling services to mention are testing services, career guidance, consultation, information, and orientation. And the heart of the guidance and counseling services, the counseling. These services believed to support the promotion of the holistic development of students. I think it is beneficial to them by providing avenues to achieve their plans, build meaningful relationships, acquire moral values, attain suitable careers, and learn to develop all the dimensions of their being, their skills, their talents, and potentials for a progressive and meaningful life. Then here comes my second profession, in which I practiced altogether as being a clinical psychologist at OroCare Psychological Services located at Poblacion 2, Oroqueta City, Camis Occidental, Philippines. In also provided psychological services such assessment, testing, evaluation, counseling, and psychotherapy for the purpose of personal development, placement, employment, promotions, and court hearings as being referred. So, first in school, let us come to be in school. Before the pandemic happened, it was very easy to reach out to students. So, it just can easily go to their homerooms, to their rooms, to their classrooms, and call their advisors regarding certain students. Likewise, these guidance and counseling services and programs are readily available for them to avail. So they may straightforwardly step in the office and request for such services, especially counseling, whenever they have problems, issues, and share the things they are bothering with. Now, with this pandemic, everything went upside down. It's hard to reach out to students, and they can no longer readily access such services that we provide in the guidance office. Additionally, the mental health issues of students were in concern. Not just that, we also have cyber or online abuses, which emerged significantly. It really was overwhelming. But, however, we didn't let this pandemic hinder us from delivering these services to them. Thus, we adapt and find ways. Through the use of online and telecommunications, we open channels for them to share and let out their thoughts and feelings. But still, the challenge remained, especially for those students living in remote areas. But again, we never give up in finding other possibilities just to be of help. Another stereotype for being a guidance counselor or in the guidance office is the thought of being a discipline office or officer that somehow imposed punishments to students who violate the school policies, the school rules and regulations. In a public school here in the Philippines, with a limited budget and the people to be assigned in specific tasks, yes, truly, guidance counselors have multiple roles on top of the usual role as a guidance counselor and acted as discipline officers. Or we could also act as teachers. I could also experience before of being a registrar, a nurse at times when students are having problems with their breathing, or even guarding students, and etc. So there are many roles as guidance counselors. Really, students had feelings of fear whenever they hear guidance office or see the guidance counselor, especially in public schools. As observed, truly students were apprehensive with guidance office. Even though it may seem impossible to easily erase this notion on students' minds, but little by little, we, the guidance counselors, displayed a friendly image. And of course, full of smiles and being joyful. And also, we corrected this notion through orientations, information dissemination, and as much as we can, we avoid imposing disciplinary measures to students who violated school policies. I made a tagline: do not fear, for the guidance counselor is here. So, this helped the students process the information that when they are in trouble, we, the guidance counselors, can be of help. However, these stereotypes still remain in the present. Another stereotype to mention of being a guidance counselor in school is that when one sees a guidance counselor, people think, or the students will think, that one already has committed violations or being a problematic student. Probably, yes, it may be true, but not totally. Guidance counselors also build on student strengths through awareness, discovery, and even conducting trainings, seminars, orientations, and implementing various programs for self development. Similarly, on being a psychologist, it was also inescapable of these stereotypes. People think that when you see a psychologist, they are already mentally ill, and that people seem to believe that when one see a psychologist, one is already crazy or insane. Of course, it's not true. Not totally in that way. And yes, psychologists, we psychologists, we catered to mentally ill clients who probably are that disturbed or even being crazy. But it does not necessarily apply to all. Not all clients that we catered are being mentally ill. And it's really better to seek psychologists before the severity of symptoms will occur. And do not wait for problem or conflict to be grave before you consult a psychologist or see a psychologist. Another stereotype of being a psychologist is that psychologists are mind readers. When one knows you are a psychologist, they will immediately say in dialect, psychologist di ay ka? Saikuha kuno ko be? Oh, so you are a psychologist. Will you read me? Or will you read my mind? Of course not. We don't read minds. However, we study scientifically human behaviors so that we can understand, detect, treat, and build patterns to predict such occurrence of behavior so that we may know the progressions, the prognosis of such treatments. Another misconception of being in a helping profession, a guidance counselor at the same time, a psychologist, is is that we are regarded as somehow as miracle workers. A miracle worker. So that's really a strong word for that. But we are not miracle workers. They think that after you see a guidance counselor or a psychologist, immediately all your troubles, all your problems, everything that you have will be gone. And that's a miracle. Of course, we are not that kind of person. Yet I'm pretty sure that we don't do such things. For problems, issues, or conflicts that need to be processed, and with the higher the intensity of these concerns or problems, the longer the processing it will take. And definitely the outcome of such intervention will also largely depend on the client himself or herself. We are there to help, guide, and teach clients. Before the pandemic, as a psychologist, I usually see clients, majority of them around 75%, were on assessment with regards to employment, requirements for promotions. The 25% were for personal assessment and psychotherapy and referred clients for psychological evaluations by the Department of Social Welfare and Development, the SWD, with pending cases. Now, during this pandemic, it totally reversed. So, making this 75% for personal assessment and psychotherapy and referred clients, and 25 were on employment requirements. So, there are more court cases emerged, most especially on violence against women and children and personal experiences of being depressed, high levels of anxiety, traumatic experiences, and other psychotic features. With this workload, stress was really inevitable. One truly needs to adapt and learn new skills to deliver such psychological services within these times. Personally, on health, physical health, the early part since the lockdown happened, all people stayed at home, and guess what? It's all you can eat. In effect, there is an increase in body weight, which also led to feeling heavy, not wanting to move, easily be tired, lack of motivation, and just wanting to rest to sleep. However, this experience of mine was just temporary. As the quarantine rules loosened, borders relaxed a bit, and people began to adjust with this new normal, I too experienced adapting to the situation. But even though I adapted to the situation, still the interest and the craving to be free, where I can travel, move around without any restrictions and hassle, were always there within me. This impacted my mental health in such a way that I became irritable, restless, and simply lose focus on things, and at times I tend to forget. Presently, the adjusting part is still dwelling within me, especially on the medium of communication, and much things to be done. For as the lyrics goes, the first cut is the deepest. Yes, even though it is a certain wounds of love, it is the first things that really impacted me the most, like having this situation of ours, this pandemic, it's new to us, the routines and practices that need to be changed, and of course we need to start fresh, start anew. Stress can definitely play a great part in our overall health, may it be physical, mental, emotional, social, etc. Presently, I am still fighting within this battle and continuously exerting efforts to balance aspects of my life. For in life, there is no certain. You really don't know what will happen. Thus, living in the present moment and having each day one day at a time help me cope better. And remembering always that the greatest love of all is learning to love yourself. It's the greatest love of all. Having time for self care is deemed necessary. It's really important in these times of the pandemic. Thank you very much.
This night is indeed full of eye opening talks from which everyone can reflect on. Knowing different perspectives is an avenue to become more flexible and more pragmatic in terms of discerning problems and creating solutions. I actually listened to Mr. Quek's presentation tonight, and I learned a lot, like how people perceive psychologists as kind of scary, and how they see people who attend like uh a guidance counselors like under a guidance counselor would think na they're crazy agad or something like that. And it's good that there's a perspective from a guidance counselor himself. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, we still have three more insightful speakers for this program, right, Jem?
Indeed, Jam. And for our third speaker, he is a proud alumnus of the Ateneo de Manila University with a bachelor's degree in psychology. He obtained his license as an emergency medical technician basic or simply an EMTB, trained under Life Support Training International's EMT qualification course batch 117. He is also connected with the Philippine Society of Emergency Medical Technicians or PSEMT as a member and has certifications in basic life support and pre-hospital trauma care. He also has rich experiences and has seen a variety of cases in both private and public ambulances. More specifically, from Rescue 274 of Antipolo and the Ateneo Risk Management Unit or ARMU of the Ateneo de Manila University. Currently, he has put a hold on serving in ambulances as he is now a second year medicine student of St. Luke's Medical Center College of Medicine, William H. Quasha Memorial. Though he believes that emergency services and medicine holds a special place in his heart. Let's give our warm welcome to Mr. Jose Maria Antonio L. Cruz.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I hope my audio is okay. Everyone can
Yes,
hear me.
it's okay.
Thank you so
Yes.
much. Thank you for having me here, first of all. And my goodness, the speakers here are all such wonderful people. Grab it, the things that are going on during the pandemic, no, and the things that are happening, and the roles that need to be served. It's beyond my comprehension sometimes, and I sometimes wonder what I'm doing here, and like, well, what like with the modern day hero and everything. Like, wow, am I really worth that? But what I decide to do is I decide to strive towards being worthy of being looked at like that, and the eventual role of hopefully becoming a doctor after my medicine, after my medicine training is over. Now, I'll start with this. Like, why did I become an EMT? I was a college student, and already during my college years, I experienced a desire to help. That was really it. I wanted to help. I wanted to do more. I wanted to be able to do more for someone if they were hurt in front of me. So I signed up as a first aider. My first experiences and my first exposure to things like this was in the form of people scraping their knees or being deployed to certain events as a certified first aider, and I would provide little first aid, betadine, alcohol, bandaging, that sort of thing, and I'd hand off to the ambulance. And then I saw the ambulance, like, wow, these guys are cool. These guys are doing something really great. I wonder what it's like. But I wanted to do more. I wanted to do more. And even if I was able to help, there were certain things I couldn't do. When someone had a seizure in front of me once, for instance, during class, I was in class and someone had a seizure. I was thankful that I knew what to do in that very moment, but all I could do was transport him, bring him to the clinic, and hand him off. I was like, certainly there's something that I can do beyond this. So after college, when the plan was to go to med, but things didn't go as planned, as things often do. I had extra time, and I had remembered that there was the ambulance. So I said, how do you get into the ambulance? And I said, I'm gonna figure that out. And I did, and I went through training, and I learned, like, wow, it's like you take the first aid or everything, and you raise it up, and you have so much responsibility. It's crazy. And when I got on the field for the first time in Antipolo Rescue 274, a public ambulance, I saw all sorts. Things that's happened up to now, really, but even then it was crazy because you'd respond to motorcycle cases, Antipolo, right? So lots of motorcycles getting into accidents, what we call the MVA, lots of traumatic injuries. Once there was I can't speak too much about this because of I don't want to breach confidentiality, of course, but there were certain cases where there were shootings, and I'd respond to those. And I saw more than I ever saw in college, and I said, this is happening. This is happening in society, and when you see an ambulance go by in the city, this is what's going on. And I was in shock because I was now one of the people who could do something about that, and it felt right that if someone were to lose an ear during a motorcycle accident, I'm sorry for the graphic image, that I could be there and reassure them, you're going to be fine. I'll do everything I can. And we give them a fighting chance at the hospital, because that's really the role of an EMT and first aid in general. It's to give a fighting chance to the patient. I'll get to the misconceptions a little later, branching off of that. But to continue this, it's like in the worst day of their life, you're the first person they see, and that was such a gigantic responsibility for me, and it felt so heavy, but it felt right. That's the thing, it felt right. And I was able to bring people to the hospital. I was able to, I didn't, not everyone could be saved, of course, and that's a truth now more than ever, and it makes me very sad. But I could do something. Like as they said in, as I was taught in high school during my CAT days, if you can do something, then do it. If there's something I can do, then I will try to do it. By grace of God, I will do it. And that's what I did. And the most noteworthy of those things, the ones that really made a difference to me, there was one in particular, for instance, in the public ambulance, where it was a patient who had a leg injury, and we were sent to their home. And because it's a public ambulance, it's free of charge. You don't have to pay to be brought to the hospital by this public ambulance, at least during that time. And we arrived at their house, and their living room was about the size of what you'd imagine to be the average bathroom. And the whole family was there. They were living on the floor of their house with mattresses, and we could barely get the stretcher in, but he needed to be moved to the hospital. So we brought him to the ER, and the family was crying. The family was so upset, of course, as you would in a case like that. And when we got there, this is what struck me. When we got there to the hospital and we endorsed the patient and that we were about to go, and the patient's daughter, I believe, he tapped me on the back, and she said, Doc, magkano po yung bayad? Which translates to, how much do we owe you? And she called me Doc, which I was like, I'm not a doctor, not yet, not yet. But I was so humbled. And when I said, free of charge, you don't need to pay anything, she cried in front of me. She got teary-eyed, and I saw my purpose there. These people, doctors, health professionals, everyone, all the speakers here, we're supposed to give hope. We give hope to people. That's what brought the tear to her eyes, that there was hope for them yet, when they thought that ambulance would already run their pockets dry, but there was hope still. And in that moment, I said, maybe I should become worthy of being called that, being called Doc. And when the time came and medicine rolled around, I did my best, and I still am. And why? Because I want to help. There's only so much an ambulance personnel can do. Even in the private ambulance where I was after the public ambulance in Rescue 274, there's only so much you can do. Before I go on to my story in medicine, in the private ambulance, there was another noteworthy event that I think summed up the entire reason why we do what we do. I can't go into details, of course, but this person had it was supposed to be a normal case. We were called to get to the football field because someone had collapsed. And when we get there, I expect open fracture, splint it, let's get this done, let's stabilize him, get to the hospital. When I arrived there in the ambulance, and I knew something was wrong because as soon as we drove near the field, there was a crowd, and that's never a good thing. There was a crowd, and they called us over. They said, "Drive onto the field," and I said, "Oh, that's not good." So we arrived there, and we see that they're performing CPR. I said, "Oh no, this is it. This is what we trained for." Training just kicked in. My partner and I, we got up, we got the defibrillator, we started CPR, all the works. We tended to this patient. Can't say who, can't say when, because of confidentiality, of course. But the bottom line is, when we shocked that person, when we gave them the shock with the AED, and I felt again for the pulse, and I felt it. I felt the little thump that wasn't there when we got there. I can't describe what that feeling was like. Feeling that one sign of life that wasn't there just a minute ago. Thankfully, someone in one of the crowd was trained in CPR, so they were already doing it when we arrived, right? So that was a big factor. And we were able to help finish that off, and we were able to bring him back. And when we brought him to the hospital, we endorsed him. I hugged my partner. I was crying because that it happened. What we all both fear and prepare for, it happened. You see, we had the training. I wasn't even thinking really, but we were able to deal with it, and we brought this person back. I later found out that this person had 2 kids, a wife. These kids were like what, 3 years old, 4 years old, both of them, and we gave back their dad. And I said, there is no way that I will not become a doctor now. If I wanted this before, I want it all the more now. I want to help. I want to do more. Because there's so much, there's only, while EMT is great at being able to help with pre-hospital things, it's one of the misconceptions, like EMTs are for pre-hospital. There's a whole world after that, in hospital and post, that the doctor's in charge of, and more, of course. And I wanted to do more. But it was experiences like that that really gave meaning to what I was doing and drove me to do more, to help more, to be able to be allowed to do more and know what to do when that happens. And then I went to med, and I'm still learning. I'm a long way away. Hopefully all goes well, I will become a doctor. And that's I'm praying, and if it's God's will, it will happen. I'll be able to help even more. Now, these things are what drove me forward. But what people wonder sometimes is exactly what was I doing, right? What was I doing? People think that an EMT, sometimes people will think that an EMT is meant to save their life right on the spot. But just like a first aider, our job is actually to give a fighting chance to whoever needs it, to make it to primary care, to higher care at the hospital. That's our job. We're there to give a fighting chance. There's something in the EMT world, we call it stay and play or load and go. And that's one of the split-second decisions you have to make. Do you stay and you play, or do you load and go? And that's one of the things we train for. And sometimes you get there and it's not as easy. It's not very easy to deal with what's happening around you because so much is going on. Everyone's crazy at that point because it just happened, and they expect you to do everything. Sometimes the person's gone and you're not able to do anything. One of the big misconceptions is that defibrillator thing that I talked about, it restarts the heart. Not quite. There's a whole science to it, but to defibrillate is to stop the convulsion of the heart when it's going, because a normal heart is like lub dub, right? But when you're in fibrillation, which is one of the only shockable rhythms, there's more, of course, but one of the main shockable rhythms is something called ventricular fibrillation, or VFib. Instead of the lub dub, it's kind of like lub dub. It's going crazy. It's not pumping blood. The defibrillator shocks the heart and neutralizes all the current, and it gives the heart a chance to restart itself. And some people think you can do that on the spot. Some people think that you can make that happen right there, bring them back. That's what you're there for. But no, the main job of an EMT and even a first aider is to give the patient a fighting chance. so that when they get to the hospital, there is a bigger chance that they'll be able to make it out of that alive. So that's one of the big misconceptions about that. There are other smaller misconceptions about the ambulance. Like I heard before that when you see an ambulance and they're going sirens blaring, and then the lights go out, or the siren goes up but the lights are on, it means the patient's died inside. That's not true. EMTs are trained to fight for the patient all the way to the hospital. They never stop until the doctors take over. That's one of the big misconceptions. Um, those are one of the lighter misconceptions, of course, but it's present nonetheless. So I hope that clears some things up. Now, with regards to the pandemic, yeah, the pandemic, you're wondering how things have changed. It's interesting because some things have changed and some things have not. There's still that unpredictability in the ambulance, right? There's still that unpredictability. You don't know what cases you're going to find. You don't know what you're going to be called for. And then there's that extra layer of, do they have COVID? Now, recently we had very close encounters with the ambulance, and they had to respond. I wasn't there, of course, but I was able to see this happen within my own family. The ambulances were not sure who in that household had COVID. They were sure of one or two, but they were not sure about the rest. The problem is there. As an ambulance personnel, you don't know. You just protect yourself all the same because they need you. Sometimes you're needed, and you don't know what you're going to get into. It's like the same danger that was there before is now present now, but even worse because there's COVID. Other than the fact that a lot of ambulances are booked, and a lot of hospitals won't accept that, won't accept the patient because of being full, because of there being no space. It's hard. It's difficult, but one of the central core things in emergency medicine, I mean pre-hospital ambulance care, is that you don't know what to expect. Prepare for everything. Prepare for the worst. Hope for the best. Prepare for the worst. There's a little bit of a what we call a paradox. When you're in the ambulance, you're sitting around, especially in any ambulance, public or private. You're sitting around and you're waiting for duty. You're waiting for calls, and you're so bored. You're hoping that it's a paradox because you're hoping that you get to do something, but also you're hoping even harder that you're not needed. Because of course, if you're needed, it's the worst day of someone's life a lot of the time, right? And that's tough. So with regards to before the pandemic and now, the danger has only increased. The only thing we can do is prepare, and hope for the best. Another misconception I'd like to address right now is that ambulances are always accepted at hospitals, or that if you have an ambulance, you have even more authority to get that patient in. That's not true. The problem is the way it works in a hospital and ambulance setting is the ambulance will have to coordinate with the receiving hospital that, hey, we have a patient coming. Are you going to accept this patient? If they don't have that sureness, that very, yeah, we'll accept the patient, bring them to the ER, the ambulance will not transport. Because what happens in hospitals is this is what happens. You bring the patient to the ER in an ambulance, you're unannounced, especially now. And what's going to happen is they're going to be like, oh, you have an ambulance. Then you have a way to get to another hospital and try there because we cannot here. We're full and you didn't call ahead. That's what makes it so difficult. And that's what makes it even more troubling, this whole situation with COVID in the country. It's very hard. We encountered this ourselves. I really hope the hospital situation is able to improve. I hope things really do get better because it's so difficult that ambulances are hopping hospitals, getting turned away. Private cars are getting turned away, and people are suffering. People are dying. It's every healthcare professional's worst nightmare that there's so much you can do, but you can't. You don't have the equipment. You don't have the space. You don't have the time. You don't have the personnel. And that's similar. That goes for everywhere, whether pre-hospital or in the hospital. It's crazy, and I salute all those people who are doing their best to make this work, to save as many lives as possible, to do more, because right now we're doing all we can. Doctors are doing all we can, and when it's time for me to go out into the field again, I will do all I can. So I salute everyone who's doing that. If there's anything to take away from this, it's that on a very practical standpoint, I would very much recommend everyone learn CPR, because no matter where, no matter who, that might just save a life. And everyone can learn that. If you can learn CPR, there are organizations that do that. There are people that teach that. You can get certified. You can do something. And that's really it. Just you want to be able to do something. And I know that it's hard for people right now to be able to do anything. But even if it's for your family, and for other people, for another patient, for the healthcare professionals, one more patient, one more person, we want to be able to do something. That's what drove me all this way, because I wanted to do something. I wanted to do more. And when I get out of the MD program, when I'm able to finish that, I will continue to do more. I don't know if the COVID situation is going to be like that when I'm done. Maybe it will be. Maybe it won't. For everyone's sake, I hope it isn't, because this is bad. But I want to continue to do something. And I know I share this with all the healthcare professionals here. We're doing all we can, what we can, where we can do it. We're only one person. But like I said earlier, like I was taught, and I believe it's a military code, or something that's used often in groups and for inspiration. I am only one, but I am one. If I can do, I cannot do everything, but I can do something. And if I can do something by the grace of God, I will do it. Everyone here I know is doing that. Whether you're a professional, or like me, a student, or like everyone else, like all the other organizers here, also students, we're doing all we can in our own ways. And I want to just, if there's one message I want to give to everyone, it's that keep fighting, keep fighting, keep trying, hold fast, because things get better. They won't get better right away, but we want to keep going until it does, right? Things will get better. Let's keep fighting. Let's all cooperate. And let's remember to keep safe. Let's remember that there are people out there who are fighting very dangerous battles. And let's try to make their job a little easier by not getting infected ourselves, of course, right? But things will get better. So I will continue to do something in what little way I can. And I hope that I was able to help with my talk tonight. Later we'll have questions, I believe. And I wish everyone the best. Thank you so much.
Also, thank you so much, Mr. Cruz, for that knowledgeable and very somber but insightful message for all of us. Indeed, stay home to save the people you love and save everyone else in your community. Personally, I'm really amazed how the inner workings of the EMT system is right now. And it's in conjunction with the, well, nightmare stories that I hear of ambulances being turned away from hospitals in overcapacity and in crisis. Our worst yet, EMT teams standing by and struggling with their patients, working inside their ambulances for 3 days or more, leaving no ambulance for future patients. And one of the key points that I really loved coming from Mr. Antonio Cruz's speech is that I'll definitely practice CPR with the time that we have. Certainly, there are more opportunities via the online platform that can help not only me by arming me with skills, or probably arming you with skills, but ailing patients who need a fighting chance as well, just like that father at death's door on a field in our story a while ago. And again, one of the very nice points is that by the grace of God, let's do the best we can and let's fight for a better day together. Thank you so much, Mr. Antonio Cruz.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tony Cruz. Yes, I do really agree with you, Rem. No, I was really inspired by how Sir Antonio Cruz decided to take up medicine after being an EMT, even though the job he really saw the meaning of being a doctor and being a medical professional in this time of day. So, wow, very inspiring. Without further ado, let me introduce another heavy hitter when it comes to experience here on our podcast tonight. He is a medical doctor and was part of the Doctors to the Barrios program of the Department of Health, to which he was assigned as a rural health physician of Tagkawayan, Quezon. Among his proactive roles as the public health officer of the municipality were focused in providing general medicine medical services, managing daily affairs of the Rural Health Unit, and implementing various health programs, as well as lobbying for health policies. He also completed his master's degree in public health at the University of the Philippines, Manila. Let's all welcome Dr. Kevin Art Rodrigo Patundan.
So good evening, everyone. So first of all, I would like to thank AMSA for inviting me to this event. I think it's a good idea to also give platform to our health workers on the ground in order to give others some sense of how it is to be in the front lines. So tonight, I'm not here to give you about a lecture about rural health practice. What I'll be doing tonight is just share my learnings for about our health system and share our stories. So when I say our, I just want to honor the many people who have helped me, who have helped one another, who struggled with each other during these troubled times in this pandemic. So the first important lesson that I learned is there's a perennial problem in terms of access in the healthcare, in terms of in the rural setting. So given that, as doctors, you should strive to be the best that you can be because at times you're all they have. So I'm going to share you a story. So during the time of Typhoon Rolly, I'm not sure if that's around October or November of 2020. So a pregnant patient called for help. After a private consult, she was asked to transfer to Lucena or Naga for possible cesarean section delivery because her water broke and she is still not in labor. So the ambulance was not able to bring her to Lucena because of the severe flooding in the towns going to Lucena, and the road to Naga suffered much landslides. So all I can do at the time was to make use of what's in my arsenal. By that, basically, I mean history and PE. So before I go on, I would just like to tell you that I am an insecure person. So when the going gets tough, I have this sort of gremlin telling me that I'm not good enough. And during that time, the gremlin's voice was loud. I talked myself out of it and performed history and PE. So upon history and PE, I wasn't convinced that the bag of water was ruptured. Now, the gremlin whispered to me again, asking, who do you think you are? You're not an OBGYN. Who are you to make that diagnosis? I prayed hard that my diagnosis was correct because an unnecessary 3-hour trip to the referral hospital was risky, not only for the patient but also for the ambulance driver. Uh, because to add to the problems about the weather, the referral hospital is also a COVID hospital. So I wouldn't want any unnecessary exposure to COVID. At the time, I asked them to stay put and hope that the following day, the flood has subsided so they can go to the ultrasound facility. So the following day, the road was still flooded. An ultrasound will not be an option for the time being. And all we can do at that time was to wait. So I was really anxious because for me, whatever happens to the mother and the child will be on me. I have to take accountability. Luckily, there was an ultrasound machine in the RHU that hasn't been used for years, and the midwife told me to give it a try. Of course, as a general practitioner, I am not trained to read, let alone operate an ultrasound machine. I asked myself, would it be such a showcase of hubris to tell the patient that I will perform the ultrasound myself? Time was of the essence, so I called on my courage. I contacted my sister who is an OBGYN to guide me in performing the ultrasound. Thankfully, the ultrasound procedure went smoothly. My diagnosis was correct. The bag of water was still not ruptured, and 12 hours later, the mother gave birth to a live baby boy via normal spontaneous delivery at our clinic. So we were able to avoid an unnecessary cesarean section. In the coming years, when you start working with patients, you will also come across that gremlin who's going to tell you that you're not good enough. And when you can talk yourself out of it, he's going to ask you, who do you think you are? Don't let that gremlin break your stride. How do you do that? To be good enough, you should commit to a life of continuous learning and self-development. Work hard and work continuously. On the other hand, to get past that who do you think you are feeling, you have to believe in yourself. You have to take courage and do what you have to do. So, capacitate yourself. So, this is my first lesson. Capacitate yourself and believe in yourself. You owe it to your patients, especially because sometimes you're all they have. They deserve the best version of you. So the next lesson I want to share to you starts with the barangay health workers. I hope everyone is familiar with BHWs. When I became a DDTB, I was not familiar with BHWs. I was so ashamed actually. So usually, almost, if not all BHWs in the municipality are women. In my experience in the rural setting, I can't stress enough how important BHWs are. These BHWs are at the front lines, working as hard as us for a meager amount of compensation. They manned the checkpoints. They helped us in contact tracing, and they led us during home visits to patients that we suspect are COVID suspects or even COVID confirmed. So the BHWs I work with affirmed to me how strong the Filipina is. I see it every day, how they take care of their neighborhoods and communities as if they were family members. I saw how diligent, meticulous, and critical they are in terms of their duties. I saw how they serve without asking for too much, just like how a typical Filipino mother is to her children. These can be considered as the modern Filipina, empowered, industrious, and caring movers of society. So this is my second lesson that I want to share to everyone. We have to continuously recognize women's roles in our communities. Give them opportunities. The Filipina is strong. I believe that Filipinas will play a key role in nation building, and it's all the more reason to empower them. So also just a short plug-in, I hope that everyone supports motions to reform the BHW program of the Philippines. It is with high hopes that they can be recognized more and given stable footing in the landscape of universal healthcare. So my third lesson is a tribute to all health workers in the RHUs. So a lot of people have this impression that when you're a DDTB, you do everything health related for the community and for the municipality. So during this pandemic, my main role was to make the hard decisions in dealing with local community leaders. So I participate in stakeholders meetings, I talk to politicians, I talk to specialists, but those alone consumed most of my time. Luckily, I have a set of wonderful people keeping the RHU going. Our nurses were there to make sure that non-COVID programs were continuously running. Midwives and DOH nurses were there to take care of barangay health systems. Our admin staff were there to keep bureaucratic tasks less of a problem for us. These people kept working day and night to deliver health services to the people and keep the municipal health system from being overwhelmed. This is a testament to the talent and hard work of the Filipino healthcare worker. When you look at the bigger picture though, it's saddening that a lot of Filipino healthcare workers are leaving the country for greener pastures. This isn't limited to healthcare workers alone. In almost all industries, brain drain is a problem. This leads me to the third lesson I want to share. I learned that the common building block of all of society's systems, whether be it health, agricultural, economic, or others, is human resource. It's a bitter reality that this building block isn't always given much attention that it deserves. I hope that after this pandemic, building back better will also mean giving equal and better opportunities with adequate rewards to the Filipino workforce. For my fourth lesson, I would like to share another story. So I was conducting a home visit for a COVID positive senior citizen patient, because the treatment plan is to bring him to the isolation facility. I was directed by our municipal health officer to go to the patient's house. And when I arrived, a concerned elderly citizen chased me. She accused me of being ruthless for wanting to take away the patient from his home where he is most comfortable. I was letting every accusation slide until I heard this familiar accusation. Namamera lang naman kayo, kaya simpleng sipon at ubo, COVID agad. I'm pretty sure this is not the first time you heard of it. So full disclosure, first, yes, doctors can claim from PhilHealth for patients treated with COVID in isolation facilities and in hospitals. Second, in my 2 years as a doctor to the barrio, I never claimed anything from PhilHealth. So it was a bit offensive for me, but I kept my cool because I am the doctor. I should take the higher ground. I accept that being a doctor made me vulnerable to accusations of being in the profession just for the money. After all, compared to other health professionals, we considerably earn the highest. Hence, when the health system goes wrong, it's easy to point fingers at us. So here's my next lesson for everyone, especially for MDs. Doctors get mad when we're accused of being in the profession for the money, especially when the health system is at fault. Maybe it's not the doctor who is at fault, but we have to be conscious that in the public eye, we are synecdoches of the medical institutions and of the health system. Instead of being in the defense, maybe it's about time that we show that we doctors are at the forefront of fighting structural violence and inequities in the health system to make the public feel that we're with them in aspiring for healthcare that is patient-centered and socially just. So for the last lesson, this session, so I want to share to you my observation of the Philippine health policy environment. In the Philippines, the approach is usually top-down. This means that policy usually comes from national government and it is passed down to lower levels until it reaches the municipality or the barangay level. As you can see, it doesn't always work out. One of the things that I'm most thankful for is working with my Mayor Carlo Eliazar. So I don't know if he's conscious about it, but he practices participatory governance. I would describe his leadership style the it's similar to being a bridging leader. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but bridging leadership goes like this. If there is an issue in the community, he claims ownership of those issues. Now, because there is co-ownership of the issue between the leader, which is my mayor, and the community, solutions are co-created. The advantage of this type of leadership is that co-created solutions tend to be more amenable to both leaders and community because the creation of is participatory and everyone is encouraged to join. So my mayor does not simply make policies out of thin air and expect everyone to follow. We regularly hold stakeholders meetings every week where we discuss, revise, and improve COVID-19 related policies. We're not we're not resistant to dissent. We actually like it when community members express their dissent, express their hesitations with regards to the policies we're implementing, because it gives us leeway to improve our policies. So it gives us an opportunity to know more about the community side, what is the cost for the community, how the issues affect the community. We become more conscious of what rights and liberties of the members of the communities are we asking them to give up, and what sacrifices will they make to make to make with our possible solutions. What we're willing to commit as a local government, and what the role of the community is willing to play to be a part of the solution. And because the community plays a role in coming up with the solution, the community complies more. I was proud of this because the impact shows. The municipality of Tagkawayan has not seen much sustained community transmissions of COVID-19 since the pandemic began. So this is the last lesson I'm going to share to you tonight. When we let the community participate in policy process, we empower them to come up with solutions which are rights-based and community-centered. So I think that's enough for tonight. Thank you everyone. So let's continue in demanding and fighting for a better health system. Thank you everyone.
Thank you so much, Doc Kevin. Your experiences and insights were indeed amazing to hear about. We'll get back to you more for your more stories later in our Q&A. Rem, I learned so much from Doc Kevin today, from striving to be our best in our own fields, because we will never know when we are needed, even in events that we're really not ready for. And also, I loved how Doc was able to fight the gremlin that keeps on feeding, negative thoughts to him. Because I, honestly, as a medical student, I also have that gremlin with me. Like, I would always tell myself that I'm not good enough, that I can't do this. But it's very inspirational how Doc Kevin was able to surpass that and just teach us a lesson that we should do our best in everything. Also, I liked his point about the modern Filipina, as well as you know, the population blaming the medical professionals in our time of age right now. It's very sad how that happens. Like, honestly, being able to be exposed on TikTok, I saw how people talk about doctors and blaming them right now, saying that we're playing as the victims, that we're the cause of this pandemic. That's what they say. That's what I hear. It's very sad to hear that because honestly, our medical professionals are the heroes of what's happening right now. They're really the ones who's helping everyone to just be able to survive this whole fiasco. So, what do you think, Rem?
Indeed, I actually love Doc how Doc Matundan talked about how medical professionals, doctors in particular, are seen as representatives of the entire medical institution. Although I don't think that it's supposed to be just the doctors, because we can't
Exactly.
put doctors in pedestals. They're humans too, as people with gremlins, right? With their own gremlins and their own demons as well. And I think that what I really appreciated more at the end of Dr. Matundan's speech is how he talked about systems thinking in general. Like, what exactly do are people's motivations? What exactly can we do to engage the front lines of this war against COVID, which is essentially um, the community? The BHWs are the frontliners, the people themselves who communicate their needs, the people who themselves who are embodiments of the needs of of their communities, and who participate in policy making and making sure that our democracy and that our health care system works as it should. And I think that's the main crux of Doc Matundan's speech to me, because of my background in public health. I love talking
Yeah.
about policy. But later, maybe I guess we can talk about it more. Maybe we can now go and complete the roster of our productive and engaging minds for tonight, Jam. Don't you think?
Yes, exactly. May we now call on our last speaker, but of course not the least for
So,
tonight. So, Rem.
indeed. So, from the front lines of fighting this pandemic with information and statistics, we have one of the few contact tracers from Quezon City with us tonight. As a contact tracer for the City Epidemiology and Surveillance Unit, or CESU, Sir Mark, who used to be a college instructor in Our Lady of Fatima University, was one of the 26 people who helped track and verify over 2,400 active cases, Jam, and
That's a lot.
3 days worth of backlogs in QC alone to boot. Today, he's here to talk about his experiences in contact tracing and his essential role in our crisis and pandemic response. Let's give it up for Mr. Mark Nicole Mercado.
Before I started as a contact tracer. So I am actually a medical technologist by profession, and as you have said, I am a clinical instructor of College of Medical Laboratory Science of OLFU Pampanga. And as a clinical instructor, actually, I used to guide students during their internship period. I'm the one who addressed the concerns of students, parents, college, and the hospital, which way far too far from what I am doing now. So I am actually one of those Filipinos who is afraid of losing their job when the lockdown started last year. So I risked everything just to find another one, and now I'm here working as a part of the pandemic response here in Quezon City. And it has been a big adjustment for me to cope up with the changes within my environment and workarounds as a contact tracer. Okay, so let me start by explaining our role. So actually, contact tracing plays an important role or an important part of this pandemic response. And as a contact tracer, we are the ones who identifies all the close contacts of a certain COVID-19 case. And we are the ones who issues quarantine and isolation orders. We also are the ones who gather all the data needed for us to know the status of each community. And somehow we are also the ones who recommends the areas for lockdown when there is a possible community transmission within a certain community. It sounds so easy, but it's actually hard. Okay, because this kind of response also needs the participation of each individual who is part of these communities, and without their participation, the outcome would be the same over and over again, or even worse. Okay. Here in Quezon City, actually, we have encountered a lot of challenges every single day. To start with, I guess I'll start with my very first day of service as a contact tracer, which is last year, April 17, 2020. So that actually tomorrow is my anniversary here in QCSU. Okay. So I guess first challenge for us is that I don't have any training about it for being a contact tracer. I have an idea, but I don't know how to do it. And I guess no one is actually prepared for this one. Okay, no one. Okay, but with the continuous help and guidance of our city epidemiologist, Doc Rolly. Okay, and by the guidelines being released of DOH and WHO, we've somehow made it through. And at that time, we have a very limited resources, transportation, equipments, the manpower. Before, I guess that is around May and June, April, May and June. So we have only a single team with a three-member roaming around in a single district. Actually, Quezon City has a six district, and we are part of the contact racers of District 4. And we only have one team, single team, with three members roaming around the district with cases of around 400 to 700 at that time. And I thought we've seen the worst at that time, lack of resources and too much or too many cases for that time. Okay. Pero again, uh, since part of our work is the gathering of data, which is actually uh, napakahalaga. Okay, very napakahalaga sa part namin yung pag-gather ng data. Okay, because these data are being analyzed. Okay, for us to know the status of each communities. And then these analyses were being submitted to the government and decide on what to do based on what we recommend so that they can release policies and revise it all over again uh, to respond okay with this pandemic. I am actually thankful to our city for all the supports that we have. Okay, we have received from them because all our concerns before were all addressed. Okay, so the problem with the transportation, they gave us more cars. With the equipments, they procure more, and with the manpower, okay, they hired more manpower. Okay, and by that time, I thought everything is going well. Then here comes August. Okay. August, the first rising, the time na, uh, again, nakita natin tumaas ulit ang mga cases natin. Uh, Continuous pa rin ang aming work by that time. Again, the process is still there. Okay, paulit-ulit, gather the data, then submit the analysis, then revise the policies. So, tuloy-tuloy naman ang support ng government by that time. And I thought everything is doing well na. Okay, but then I think there is one more problem. Okay, na kailangan talaga. With regards to our manpower, the equipments, kayang ibigay yan ng ating government, okay, for us to do the contact tracing. But then, one thing is what we need is the participation of the communities, the participation of each individuals of these communities. Okay, actually, these are the ones, ito ang mga tao na kung saan ang makakasagot sa problema natin. The problem here is the transmission. How can we contain this transmission if these individuals do not participate? Okay, social gatherings, travel, okay, nag-open po lahat ito, okay, para sa ating economy. Pero ngayon, nakita natin ang result. Okay, so this is the result of yun nga, ito na yung naging resulta ng pagiging tawag dito, pagiging yung mga actions ng ating mga tao ngayon, ng bawat individuals, ng bawat community. So ngayong March, na-experience natin ng biglang pagtaas, the surge, okay, which is too far naman sa cases natin. So from 400 to 700 to 1,000 to 1,400, now we have these active cases that is around 2,400 cases. And we have actually around an average of 300 cases daily for our district alone. And we have 26 field contact tracers to do all the contact tracings, to contain all these individuals, to contain all these cases. And that is too much for us to handle this time. If we compare yung our resources before and today, we have actually a lot. Kumbaga, ang dami naming resources. Okay, we have a lot of resources today as compared to last year. But then, we didn't expect that this surge, okay, sobrang taas. Okay, sobrang taas ng mga cases natin. Okay, going back, okay, to our challenge, okay, the participation of communities. Again, as I have said, we need to gather all these data na dapat ay totoo. Okay, one challenge that we have right now is that a lot of our cases, okay, hindi nagbibigay ng tamang data. They gave us different names, they gave us different addresses, different contact numbers na nag-add up sa aming trabaho. Again, as I've said, we need to these data para to analyze, okay, para makapag-implement tayo ng proper policy na kailangan natin ngayon. But then, with these data being given to us, isa sa mga challenges namin, hindi namin makuha ng tama. Okay, siguro, next, participation of individuals again. We have actually experienced mga doctors, okay, from these communities. That is actually one of our cases. I am expecting, okay, as a medical frontliner, okay, I expect that I will participate in this kind of response. But then we have encountered a lot of medical professionals who are actually not entertaining us for the contact tracing part. Somehow my heart is broken because I'm expecting that mapapadali. Okay, our work will be kumbaga mas mapapabilis. Pero these certain individuals, sila ay nakakadagdag sa problema sa community. And I'm saddened about that part. So just to give you an example, so we have actually a medical frontliner who is actually close contact, then refused to be quarantined. Then the next day, hindi na namin siya mahanap. Umalis ng bahay. Then, hindi na namin alam kung saan siya nagpunta. So what will happen kapag ka nakawala ang aming mga cases? So when we, if hindi namin magawa yung pagpapa-isolate or pagpapa-quarantine, these certain individuals may be the one who carries the virus and may cause the spread, okay, faster. So, and that certain individual is actually a medical technologist. And ayun na nga po ang nangyayari. Next is that we also have experienced some of our government officials who does the same thing. Do not want to be quarantined, do not want to be isolated. Then the problem is, how can we do our job ng maayos if these individuals or this kind of individuals ay mismong ayaw makipag-participate. And another one, okay, so maybe those examples ay okay na. Okay, so next challenge that we have right now is that the implementation of the a special concern lockdown. So we have actually here in Quezon City, we are implementing this kind of lockdown. Why? Because somehow, based on our data, based on the data that we have gathered, okay, there are some points na kung saan uh, at this certain community, okay, community transmission is possible. Okay, and based on our data, so ano yung mga criteria namin? So we have actually yung the activities. Okay, the activities of the people of that community. And that includes kung gaano ba kadense ang population, ano ba yung mga activities na ginagawa nila. So kapag ka nakita namin yung mga ganong scenarios, okay, we recommend for that area to be locked down. Okay, so ano ang advantage ng lockdown? As an example, I guess, I have one. We have a certain part of our District 4 na ni-lockdown for a month. That is 1 month lockdown. No entry, no exit for a full month. And when we tested all the individuals at that community, we have gathered around 120 COVID-19 cases. If those 120 COVID-19 cases, okay, ay hindi na contain at that time, maybe those are the ones who are spreading the virus during those times. And those, and again, right after that lockdown, that certain community for for around 10 months, hindi na sila nagkaroon ng case. So, ano yung point ko dito? Okay, so these lockdowns na being implemented here in Quezon City, uh, ay, bukod sa nakakontain natin yung mga uh, bukod sa nakakontain natin yung transmission or napipigilan natin ang transmission, we actually teach the community how to do it proper next time. Kumbaga, how to tawag dito, paano ba mapipigilan, paano ba maiiwasan na in the near future. Okay? Since after lockdown, marirelease sila, so they will engage ulit sa community na kung saan possible pa rin na magkaroon tayo ng cases. Pero yun na nga, if matuturuan natin ang bawat community sa ganitong paraan, again, their participation ay kumbaga napaka-importante para mapigilan natin ang transmission. Okay, next po na challenge na nakukuha namin ngayon actually. Okay, so next challenge na nakuha namin ngayon is again the participation of the LGUs. Okay, so we have yung mga barangay units natin. So as I compare, okay, yung mga previous responses before, okay, it is very necessary na magkaroon talaga ng participation ang lahat. So hindi lang siya ang response natin ngayon, hindi lang siya iikot sa bawat individual ng bawat community, kailangan din natin ng support sa bawat barangays. And from that support, okay, with our help or with the help of the barangays, kaya nating ma-identify mga infected individuals, mababantayan silang na maayos. If yung bawat individuals magpa-participate, lahat ay magiging maayos. So proper coordination sa bawat entity na kailangan, okay, ay makakatulong. Sobrang makakatulong sa ating response ngayon. I think yun na yung iba mga challenges na meron na tayo sa ngayon as a contact tracer. And siguro para sa lahat ng nakikinig, okay, please help us, okay, help our community. Again, each and every one of us is part of these communities. Ang bawat participation natin sa pag-contain ng virus ay napaka-importante. And I guess that's all na muna po. And thank you. Thank you po.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mercado. So, I really learned a lot from his um, speech today because as someone who graduated as a medical technologist as well, it's we weren't even taught on contact tracing. Kaya talagang it was hard for Sir Mercado to switch from being a professor from Pampanga. Funny that I'm from Pampanga as well, but to switch from his career as a professor was just very focused on academics and teaching students on clinical laboratory science to switching to becoming a content field where he was able to still progress with it. And I also was like my eyes were open to the fact that a lot of people like contact tracing is a really big part when it comes to pandemics and even like any kind of diseases, because the more that you become prepared for it, the more you get to prevent it. He told us about like there were like a number of people, I think 150, that if they weren't able to contact trace those people, the COVID could have been spread more. So I really love the speech. So thank you, Sir Mark. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Our five equally competent speakers for Health Playlist. It was an honor for us to listen to a plethora of perspectives on health and the challenges faced in the fight against COVID 19. Now we'll proceed with the question and answer portion of our health playlist.
Our first question is, and this comes from our attendees here in our Zoom and our Facebook Live. So, what are the plans or activities done to improve the neglected health issues in our country? And this is a question that is posed to all speakers.
I think a lot of health issues were neglected because of the pandemic. As you can see in the hospital census, you could really see non-COVID cases going down because people are very afraid of going to health facilities. So I think one of the improvements in uh, to address those neglected diseases is the incorporation of telehealth in the practice of medicine. A lot of clinical patients now resort to telehealth, and I think telehealth actually is still not that uh, I think the Philippines is still not prepared for telehealth, but I think with the pandemic, the development of telehealth is still has been accelerated. So I ask everyone to support the national telehealth bill because it's really we see the importance of telehealth services, especially now in the pandemic. It's been pending for years and it's already frustrating. So I hope everyone participates in supporting the National Telehealth Bill.
Thank you so much, Doc. Yeah, for our other speakers, do you have any addition to the question given that if there are any plans done to improve the neglected health issues in our country?
Can I speak also?
Yes, pa. So,
I
Gian.
think I agree with Dr. Matundan with regards to the telehealth or telemedicine, because as in our case or in our field, we have also experienced a lot of patients who have been experiencing difficulty in traveling, especially to those patients who have mobility issues, mobility problems, especially the access to public utility vehicles nowadays, especially with the pandemic. It's been hard for them to access or seek for medical or professional help as well. So I think if there's one thing that should be improved, I think it should be on improving our telemedicine or telehealth processes or system here in the Philippines. That would be a great help to our community or to our country.
Thank you so much, Sir Gio, for that input. As for our other speakers, do you have any other?
Okay, so I think I would agree to our two speakers with regards to the improvement of our telemedicine. Actually, we are using it right now as part of our pandemic response here in Quezon City, wherein our cases who are actually in home quarantine, strict home quarantine, uses this kind of telemedicine for us to monitor them. So actually, we have an increased numbers of death cases. Sad to say, okay, because we have actually cases wherein there is in need of medical attention at that time. Okay, with the use of with the improvement of this telemedicine, I think uh, marami pang mas masasave na mga cases or severe cases na pwedeng mangyari sa ating mga cases. Ayun lang po.
That's right, Sir Mark. Thank you so much for that. So we can move on to our next question. So the next question was, I read before in other countries, they really focus on intercollaboration, especially of community health workers to deliver primary care throughout their nations. Is this setup feasible for the Philippines? Like, what concrete steps can we take towards a better primary healthcare system? So, any of our speakers could answer po.
I think I'll start
Yes, Doc.
the
Thank
ball
you.
rolling. So I think it's possible, but it requires a complete overhaul of how we think about our health system. We have to start at the basic education level. I have to ask the viewers, what were you taught during your health classes in elementary, in high school? Do you think it can contribute to much to your life? It's actually, do you remember anything from health class, basically? No. We have to restructure what we discuss in basic education to make it more geared towards universal health. Next, one of the most important building blocks of health systems that is important in if we really want to achieve primary healthcare is health governance. So one of the steps we're taking right now is the institution of the municipal and provincial leadership and governance program with the Department of Health. So with this program, we teach mayors and we teach governors how to prioritize health, how to put health in the agenda, how to engage the community, and how they can evaluate better the health problems of their own communities and their own LGUs. So I think it's very important because I think health governance is a very encompassing building block when we consider the six building blocks of health systems.
Thank you so much, Doc. That is actually a really good answer po. Like, as a student before, I can't remember what was taught to us in our health class, and it's good to go to the basics first. So, Sir Kwek, we would like to hear your input for this one. If, in other countries, they focus on intercollaboration, especially of community health workers to deliver primary care throughout their nations. Do you think this setup is feasible for the Philippines po? Do you have any concrete steps that we can take towards a better primary healthcare system?
I agree with being on the collaborative side, like having a cooperation with the primary healthcare workers and the professionals as well. But however, Philippines, I think because of these stereotypes, because of these stigmas, and because of the lack of professionals who can manage all these healthcares with a number of people having these concerns or problems, maybe our country would really be having difficulties. And for me, I believe that, of course, is one way to have a solution for the really going through the collaboration and cooperation. But I guess there's really a big challenge for that.
Indeed, I really think that having breaking down stigmas is big part of our overhaul of the systems thinking that we were talking about with all of your points, dear speakers. I really appreciate all of the input coming from everyone. Maybe we can now tackle specific inputs from, let's say, the EMT field.
Yeah.
For example, let's have Sir Antonio answer the question from our listeners right now. How did EMTs handle emergency non-COVID cases? Were patients required to have swab tests first before getting treatment? And what exactly is the treatment protocol for patients who are non-COVID cases in general?
Okay, thanks for that question. In the EMT field and even in first aid, one of the things you're
Yeah.
taught first is something called the CAB. It's very familiar to any healthcare workers. The CAB or the ABCs nowadays is the CAB. It's what you call the primary survey. And the problem with emergency cases is that it's exactly that. It's an emergency. You don't exactly have the time to prepare for these things on site. You prepare yourself, you prepare your equipment, you prepare your psyche, but you don't know what you're going to face there. So one of the jobs of the EMT is to get there on site and figure out what's happening, what's going on. And it all goes down to the CAB, circulation, airway, breathing. And then you fix problems from there. With regards to COVID, nowadays, even now, with COVID being an immense threat to everyone, especially in the medical field. We don't have the time for these things. There's no You can't go to a patient having a heart attack and then ask them, "Oh, can you take the swab first, and then we'll come get you." Sometimes you just got to go in, but protect yourself because that's all that can be done. Back then, uh, safety was still paramount. Before we even get to the CAB, first, because we were even said specifically, don't go and be a hero, lest you become a patient yourself. I can't help you if I am gonna go down myself. So we have to stay safe. That includes everything from environmental hazards, other cars, electrical currents, imminent shooter, anything like that, to other than environmental threats, to threats from the patient. Are they HIV positive? Do they have AIDS, for instance, or other blood transmissible conditions? You have to protect yourself from that. So the PPE, gloves, mask, always necessary. Even back then, you basically treat every case as if it could be the worst case scenario because it only takes one slip up for things to go wrong for you. And if you go down, nothing else, you won't be able to help anyone else. Now that there's COVID, that's been turned up to like 11, basically. Some EMTs like to have their bunny suits up the entire time in the ambulance. They have the respirators. If before you were preparing for any possible bloodborne illness, you're now preparing for possible COVID. And the thing with COVID is you don't even know if it's there. Sometimes it's asymptomatic. Sometimes it's looks like a flu. Sometimes it looks like a cough, a cold. And nowadays, sometimes it's even manifesting without fever and only hypoxia. COVID is crazy. It's an ongoing field of study. We're still trying to figure out exactly how it works, but it keeps changing, lalo na with all the strains, all the different variants. It's a constantly evolving threat. So really, there's no way to pinpoint, I do this one specific thing to protect me against that one specific thing. Sadly, that does not work, especially in the field of emergency med and medicine in general. You just prepare for every possibility, and then you go into that situation hoping that it was enough. I hope that answered the question. Thank you for that, though.
Yes,
Well,
thank you
thank
so
you. That
much.
was very eloquently put.
It was. Just to, in line with what you answered, po, is there, sorry, Sir Cruz, just to clarify, is there an assumption that all emergency patients are positive to safely manage their cases, like right now? Po? Is it
Now,
there a change?
and yeah, nowadays, while I myself am not on the field, I'm updated on how things are. Nowadays, yes, we assume that all cases are positive because there's no way to tell for sure unless, like, say, an RT-PCR, which is the gold standard. But an RT-PCR takes 24 hours or so to come out. It cannot be done on the field, and the normal quick result tests, the rapid tests, are not 100% effective at finding out if there's COVID or not. So you can't be too sure. So if you were to call an ambulance service and ask them, okay, what's the breakdown of my fees? They will tell you, okay, here's the transport and ambulance fee, and then here's the PPE fee. And if you tell them, oh, we're sure the patient's non-COVID positive, they'll still insist, no, the PPE still has to be part of the payment because we have to protect the EMTs in the ambulance because you never know. Maybe the patient isn't COVID positive, but their housemate could be. Maybe the house is completely fine, but someone on the street who is watching everything unfold could be positive. It's hard to know because when you go down there as an emergency personnel, there's no way to not be hands-on with that. You're going to be the person kneeling beside the patient. You're going to be the person controlling the crowd. You're going to be in the front line at that very moment. And when that happens, there's no way to be sure unless you protect yourself. It's similar to the logic of remember before early in the pandemic, the logic of wearing masks was not only to protect yourself, it's to protect other people. Because let's say if you had something, wearing a mask would help stop that from spreading from you. So similarly, in the EMT field, if you can't protect everything else, you can stop it at the source or at least at one of the specific points, start or beginning. At this point with the EMT, you protect yourself because you're sure whatever the threat is, it'll all come down to you. So if you protect yourself and you can't stop the threats from coming to you, you put up defending yourself against that. If you follow the protocol and keep safety first, as you are trained in any first aid course or EMT course, and even in medicine, safety first, safety first, safety first. It's not just a sign you see up on construction buildings or dangerous areas. It goes also for a medical practitioner when approaching dangerous situations. safety first for yourself so that you may be able to help your patient.
Indeed. So again, it really boils down to taking care of yourself in order for you to take care of others, no?
Yes.
And as
Exactly.
environmental scientists would say, or environmental health practitioners would say, there are many levels to protection. And I agree with all that you say, Sir Antonio, no? But let's move on to intersectoral collaboration because at the end of the day, you also have a background in psychology. And I just want to ask, on behalf of our viewers, in what instances are you able to combine psychology and the EMT field? And maybe we can also push this question over to Mr. Quek, who has probably insights on this too.
Okay, thank you for that question because that's very relevant actually. Because when in the emergency field and medicine in general, like I said earlier during my talk, when you see a patient, it is entirely possible you are seeing them on the worst day of their life so far. So you want to be there for them. They're in distress. They are in a panic. They are freaking out. All sorts of things. Am I gonna die? What's gonna happen to me? All sorts of things are running through your head. All the adrenaline is there, and all the things that just came up to that point exactly. Like say it was an accident, and it just happened. Emotions are high. Emotions are flaring. My psychology background, while sometimes scientific concepts specifically were able to help me, like knowing what causes stress, how adrenaline plays a role in this, etc. It was the exposure to these actual situations in my field before that helped me to understand how best to deal with someone who's going through something like this. For instance, I had one case where, well, I can't say too much. I had one case where this person was worried about them not being able to use their hands. Okay, they had just been hit by a jeepney. They were a pedestrian and they were just hit by a jeepney near the back area, and they flew a few meters. And I was worried about spinal damage, and he was worried about it too because he knew that spinal damage could affect his hands. And then when he was telling me this in the ambulance, he was very upset. We were on the way to the hospital. Um, I my training and my background had me wondering why is he upset about this. I wanted to get to the root of the problem, the root of the fear, the root of his anxiety. And I said, "Sir, why are you worried about this?" And then he said, "Because I play piano for a living. I have I have a band and I perform to make money. And if I don't have my hands, I won't be able to do that." And so I said, okay, now that I know this, let me look for specific signs on you right now. I can't assure you, but let me look for specific signs and symptoms on you right now that might be able to help with that. And I mixed my EMT training to look for the signs of spinal damage affecting his hands, trembles, numbness, tingling, all that. And thankfully, there were none. Amazingly, there were none. And I told him, okay, sir, I've looked you up and down. And as from what I can see for now, you don't look like you have any obvious and prominent spinal damage. We'll have to check at the hospital. I'm not so sure about what they'll find, but we'll have to see. Well, right now, as you're presenting to me, it's not showing any sure signs. So there's a good chance you'll be okay, but we'll have to see po at the hospital. Later at the hospital, I was able to find out that he was okay. The scan showed that he was fine, and he was very happy about that. But what was important is that in that moment, I was able to have empathy for the reasons for his fear, and I was able to, in a way, and not I can't do this for everyone, but in that moment I was happy that I was able to somehow find the source of his stress and soothe that to make this worst day of his life so far a little less terrible. And psychology and knowing that human connection is so important, empathy is so important in the field of medicine where people are in stress, helped me to do that time and time again for many patients. It doesn't always work, of course, but having this knowledge at hand for whatever case you find, from minor to severe, it has always panned out. When it does work, it's always panned out in a happier, more calm patient. And even if things go worse, you know that in that moment you were able to help them a little bit, and that's enough for me.
Thank you so much. So maybe, Sir Quek, you can shed some light on the idea of maybe psychological first aid as a tool for probably EMTs, and not just EMTs, but people in general, to help them process how to deal with stress, psychological stress.
Okay, basically, I agree with Sir Cruz when he mentioned about psychology and his work. Really, psychology, we could say that It's just part of scientific knowledge and evidences, but again, it's part of life. It's part of life. There's a notion that it says there is no health without mental health. So, a person having a specific health problem, physical symptoms, or physical problems, the the physical is not just on the physical matter, but it really affects the person's mental health. For example, a person is suffering from a certain pandemic virus, and he or she becomes positive. He contracted the virus. Later on, not just the physical part, like the symptoms physically that he or she would experience, but as well, mainly on the mental part. The person becomes more anxious. He or she would tend to really say that the world will end and he or she will die, and then the life is again meaningful. And then again, yeah, that's it. The it says here that the notion on the physical health really affects our mental health.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Sir Quick. Yeah. You guys really have a point, and it's so nice to see that different fields of medicine are collaborating for this. For of course, we have to go for like the physical therapy part as well. So this question is directed to Sergio. So for the physical therapists, how did you carry out your work during the pandemic, considering that your line of work requires immediate contact with the patient? Are your therapies through online, or could you describe the process of it? And of course, there's like challenges in this way of consultation with telemedicine. Could you enlighten us when it comes to this topic?
Yes, thank you for that question. With regards to that, I had experience that I was able to manage a patient's problem. Just not to dwell on further details, but it was more of knee issue. It was like a long-standing knee issue. Just because of the pandemic, she had the time to work on that knee problem. So it was really a challenge for me, and maybe it goes well with the other healthcare professionals when you're dealing with it through telemedicine or telehealth, because especially in our case, just like what you said, it requires like immediate contact from coming from us, especially when you want to view or check the patient's movement specifically. Or let's say, for example, we wanted to check more on the structures if they're still intact, if there's like possible swelling or probable like clicking sound. We wanted to check on that. However, as much as possible, we wanted to utilize on what we can do through the telehealth or telemedicine. And also, with regards to that, it was like more of a, well, not is not it was not 100% like a direct hit towards the issue, but rather I was able to give the patient certain assessment movements that were somehow an assessment in order for me to be able to manage the issue as well. So she was given multiple movements for me to check if what the problem was, so I was able to rule in, rule out issues regarding that one. And that's for the case. However, when we deal also with neurologic cases, especially with stroke patients, it is really hard for us, especially the patient is suffering from any let's call aphasias. It's really difficult if the person right there with them is not trained or not doesn't have any background with that, especially also if they don't have the capacity to have like a digital or like a virtual like face to face through virtual, just more of like through texting or through calling. It's really difficult for them to picture out the case or like the problem is. So it was really hard for me and for us, maybe as well, for the different institutions that have also been offering telemedicine. However, I believe there's always a room for improvement for this one. Just like on what Doc Matundan said earlier, that we need to do like an overhaul for this one, because if I believe if we do this the right way, if we're able to like properly disseminate on the things that we should do in order for this kind of system to work, I believe it should be like, yeah, it would go hand in hand, or it should be like cohesive with the other healthcare professionals as well. Because I think also, if let's say for example some patients prefer face to face, then other healthcare professionals couldn't provide that kind of service as of the moment, especially with the pandemic. It would be really hard for them. But if it is like, especially some individuals here in the Philippines are like they first believe on what doctors say, because like for them, like doctors are really good. And then, however, let's also not put into let's say on underlight the other healthcare professionals as well who have also their knowledge, which would also help the doctors as well to manage well the patient's problems or illnesses that would also lead to the patients spending less on how to cater their illnesses or problems. So yeah, if there's like a proper correlation, or rather what do you call this, sharing of, what do you call this one, referral rather, it would lead to a greater improvement to a patient's status or progress with regards to their illnesses.
So really, we've been talking about and harping about referrals and making sure that tech works for us, especially during this very time where instance needed, but still connection maintained. So a while ago, one of our one of the people who were really advocating for teleconsultations and basically using tech in all of our interventions is Sir Mark. So um apparently, contact tracers are very much emphasized with the WHO's pandemic response, and and the WHO's word by word actually said that it's very important that contact tracing is very important during this pandemic. So, Sir Marco, you just like to know, how do you feel about this statement? Do you feel somehow pressured by it?
Okay, sir. So actually, we are all pressured by it talaga. Um, when the WHO guidelines, okay, actually, we are being guided by these guidelines, okay, being released by the WHO, by the DOH. Then, as mentioned, that we need to at least trace at least 37 close contacts for each cases. Imagine if we have an average of 300 cases, that is times 37 per individual. So, in this scenario, with the very little participation of these individuals, hindi talaga kakayanin or nahihirapan kaming maka-achieve or ma-achieve namin yung 37 close contacts na kailangan dapat namin makita sa bawat cases. So with a very, very low manpower right now for these very high cases, I really think that this at this time, okay, that is impossible right now. Kaya po, yung contact tracing namin, okay, kaya kami lahat na contact tracers, we are all pressured by this statement of WHO. Okay, so and since we know na this contact tracing is really very important right now, but then kulang sa ngayon at this time.
Well, thank you, Sir Mark, for admitting to us, no, na sometimes there could be lapses, maybe because we have a lack of manpower, or maybe a lack of resources. Although our policymakers do try their best to provide us the sufficient manpower and resources. Sometimes it really just doesn't work. So a while ago, we introed on talking about health systems in general. I think there's no better speaker to talk to us about it than Dr. Mutundan, who basically opened the Q&A talking about health systems. So maybe we can ask a specific question to him, Jam?
Yes, Ram. As for Doc Matandan, the question is, overall, is your Dr. Sudabario experience worth it? Were you satisfied, and why or why not? Because as a future doctor as well, I want to look into being a Dr. Sudabario. I really have no idea if it's, I know it's worth it, but I don't know like what goes in and out, and if it's, the experience for it, Doc.
I could say that my experience during the last 2 years in the Doctors to the Barrios program is very worth it. I learned a lot, especially when trying to come up with solutions that are systems-based. Systems-based thinking. I really learned a lot in the field. You don't get that kind of exposure in, private practice or what. I think it's a good learning ground. Although I could say that there are still gaps that we need to address, especially in the rural health practice. But I think we are doing some reforms right now, like the universal healthcare law. I have high hopes that we come up with more equitable solutions for our health problems. And I just want to clarify because we were talking about telemed. I think I need to say this about telemed. Although I support telemed, I still have to issue this warning. There are still disadvantages to telehealth. First is it's hard to have a substitute for uh, physical examination. You know how important that is. So just a few days ago, I was talking to my friend, a pediatric resident, and I heard that they have a patient, a referral, which presented with easy fatigability and difficulty of breathing. So for the longest time, the patient was managed as the patient sought consult via telehealth, telemed services, and the patient was managed as a case of pulmonary tuberculosis. uh, Apparently when the patient came in at the ER, they didn't because physical exam is still difficult in terms of telehealth. They didn't diagnose the disease correctly. Apparently, the child was a case of congenital heart disease. So as doctors, we have the responsibility that if we're given the power of telehealth, we need to capacitate ourselves in order to practice telehealth properly. So it's a different adaptation. It's not something you just learn in med school or in other, you have to adapt yourself. Next is that one of the problems in telehealth is that it can introduce more inequities in health. Remember that not everyone has access to telehealth services. Not even a lot of Filipinos still don't have smartphones. So how are you going to do telehealth? So we have to come when we come up with a roadmap for the national telehealth plan. We have to ensure that those disenfranchised, those in the marginalized sectors of society, are included in coming up with that national roadmap. So I just needed to clarify that. But maybe because you think telehealth is this golden thing that can solve everything. So I just want to clarify that.
It really is true, Doc. I really agree with you as well. It's scary how the future of medicine is right now, especially with the pandemic. We really don't know what's gonna happen for the next few years. So being able to, juggle something that we're really not used to doing is hard. So Doc, I would like to ask, do you have any final messages to our listeners today?
So I think the final message I want to impart and everyone today, the last lesson I want you to realize is that health workers can no longer stay apolitical. Our political ignorance has a price. Our political ignorance can cost patients' lives. So I hope that everyone participates in political discourses, especially that health is very relevant to every Filipino right now. So I think that's my final message.
So thank you so much, Sir Doc Matundan. No, I think I definitely agree. Healthcare workers nowadays are the ones who are victims essentially of this inequal system that we have. No, so at the end of the day, the hardest hit are the frontliners and the people who stand behind these frontliners at the end of the day. So I think we also need a message from the frontline, from the frontliner himself. We need a message from Sir Antonio. What are some final points that you'd like to summarize your talk with?
Okay, thank you for that. First off, like I am, while I myself, I'm primarily a student now. Um, I have yet to properly experience what the frontliners themselves, like Doc here and everyone else who has been right at the forefront of everything. I've yet to experience that on a personal like me experience it myself kind of thing. I can't even imagine the hardships of being in the bunny suit all day, tending to patient after patient after patient, and they're just coming in, and it's not stopping. I can understand why Doc Matundan says that we can no longer stay apolitical, because it's showing in the worst ways now in the hospitals, the number of patients, in the rising cases that we already had a sort of stoppage to, and then it went up again. We all know what we're talking about here. Something needs to happen. People need to take a stand. Something needs to change. With regards to my field, however, if my message will be this: while COVID is the main source of a lot of turmoil now and is a main source of so much hardship and difficulty and death, life does not stop. It has not stopped. The same things that caused accidents and death before this are still doing that now. What am I talking about? Drunken driving, drunken motorcycle riding, ignorance on the road, things like this. That still happens. That can still happen as much now as it did before. When I was in Antipolo, the majority of my trauma cases were motorcycle riders not wearing their helmets, most of the time drunk, and most of the time without a license. These are preventable things. These are things that don't have to happen. It's not like COVID where can we can take specific measures to stop that as best we can. This is something that is done out of a decision to do something really, really unsmart, to drive drunk, to not be careful on the road, to not get a license before going out on the road. What am I saying? My message is keep safe. Keep safe, meaning not just to stay home, which is a given the COVID pandemic, but keep safe everywhere else, because while COVID has taken over our lives, life itself has not stopped. It still goes on. We are still in danger of the same things as we have been before this. Stay safe always. Preventable things, prevent them. Don't let them happen. Take care of yourselves so that I know it's hard because we're all home. It's hard to exercise, it's hard to eat right, it's very difficult. I can understand. But let's just do the best we can to the things that we can do something about. And for the things that really all it takes is to make a decision to not go out, not drink, and not drive while drunk, that should be a given. Things like that shouldn't happen. Everyone should stay safe. And lastly, I can't say this enough. While you were mentioning primary healthcare earlier, and yes, it's important we get that everywhere. We restructure the system, as Doc said, so that we have better healthcare and better ways to deliver that healthcare everywhere we go. I also believe, however, specifically that, like I said earlier, everyone should learn CPR, because no matter how fast that healthcare, no matter how quickly we can get that to people, the very first person that can do something about, say, a cardiac arrest, which is a still leading case of coronary and other heart-related diseases are still a very high cause of death up to now in our country. The very first person who's going to see you is the person in your house, your neighbor, your katulong, your sister, your brother, your son, your daughter. Those are the first people who are going to be able to do something. And CPR is a life-saving technique, specifically because it can be delivered by anyone right away. So now that we're all home, and now that the risks are high for many things, especially lack of exercise, bad diet, it's important that we have these things at the ready. Like I said earlier, the paradox is you want to be prepared, but you also really, really, really hope you don't need it. So that'll be my last message. Stay safe and be
Thank,
prepared. Thank
thank
you.
you so much, Sir Antonio. That is right po. As for Sir Mark Mercado, may we hear your final message po?
Okay, so as I've said kanina, earlier, so the participation of each individual, each one of us, is very essential right now. That is what we need right now. We have experienced this surge, this March, and that is actually the worst that we have right now. So I guess yun lang. I'm so sorry. I have so much in my mind na kailangan kong sabihin na gusto ko sanang pakiusap sa lahat. Pero I think this pandemic talaga will end if we all participate talaga sa lahat ng responses. And yun lang. I'm so sorry.
Thank you so much, Sir Mark, for going the distance with us tonight and telling us and broadcasting to the world that we need to participate, even if that we need to really cooperate with our policies and our protective measures at the end of the day, because we need to protect not just ourselves but our communities as well. Sir Gio, maybe you have some final messages as well.
Okay. I think my final message as well is same with Doc Matondan, is I think we should use our voice, especially with the social media. Like a lot of people are spending their time scrolling down on their Facebook timelines with due respect to also others who are also doing their jobs as well. However, I believe that if we see someone like especially us healthcare professionals or who are also in the field, there are a lot of postings that even COVID is not true. They really need to experience COVID before they really believe that COVID is true. I've experienced like I have friends who have relatives who died because of COVID. um, let's also do our best to educate people. So if you see someone out there posting something that is not really correct, or let's say they don't know something about it, let's do our best to educate them as well, because it is also our duty to educate the people who have less knowledge about it, especially if you see a lot of people sharing. I've seen like in the PT world, if you're not aware of it, even the OH shared about the person who was sharing about false info about COVID-19. It is really alarming, and it is really hard for us, especially because it would reflect the PT world, and it would really be a big backlash towards us, especially if like considering the misconceptions um, given to our profession. So it is really hard. So yeah, as a person, not just PT as well, is also I get hurt, especially when these things come up in our feed, because it's also affecting our source of living. So yeah, I believe we should use our voice. We don't. We must use our voice to empower ourselves, because it is just us who would help the profession. Because if we just stay there, stay apolitical without doing anything about it, change would not be change wouldn't be there. So if we want to wish to see change, it should start within us. So we should use our voice wisely. And yeah, so in line with also the others. So yeah, keep safe. Do our best. Make sure to help each and every one. So yeah, I think that's all for me.
I heard about like the PT Sergio was talking about, like the one who was spreading false information. It was so sad to see that, especially when he was talking about like the doctors, and he was specifying certain universities as well. It was heartbreaking because he's not only representing himself, but also the profession of the PTs and also the Philippines. But yeah, so it's really sad that things happen. But yeah, we're here to educate people as much as we could in the best ways. But yeah, moving forward, may we ask Sir Kwek to give his last message for us today. Thank you so much,
Okay,
Sir Gio.
to really sum up my message of this health playlist, first of all, yes, I would agree with that educating, really, it's the best way to stop or to prevent this or to cure these stereotypes, these discriminations, these misconceptions about our professions being in healthcare. So, of course, there are different kinds of misconceptions and stereotypes. And yes, providing them with the information, orienting them with the real situations that we are in, our specific rules, our specific the nature of our jobs. So I guess it will help them people realize that of course it's not really true, the stereotypes and everything. Secondly, I would like to say for the collaboration, even though we are different kinds of people, we are unique, but again, we need the collaboration. We cannot stand alone. We need other people, especially us in the healthcare. And I'm going back, even though we are a social person, we need people. There's our systems, there are politics, there's our community, society. But I'm going back to the individual, ourself. Why? Because for me, ourself, our individual is really important. That's why, to sum up my message, it's more of the self care. Self care is not being selfish. Self care people might say that of course he or just thinking about himself or herself, but of course it's not. Self-care is not being selfish, but it's being selfless. We need to take care of ourselves because the only thing that we can control is ourselves. We cannot control other people, we cannot control the happenings, the surroundings, and everything. So the only thing we can control is ourselves. So again, that's my message to each and everyone. You really need to take care of yourself because taking of yourself, especially us in this healthcare practitioners, we help other people, that's why we need to take care so that we can help as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sir Kwek. Yeah, that was a really good end to, a wrap to our health playlist today, is to always remember to take care of ourselves first, because we are the people who are going to be taking care of others too. So thank you very much to our speakers for gracing this event. It has been an honor to have you all here. It was more than fruitful to have such rich discussions, and we hope that it sparked critical thinking amongst our viewers for tonight.
So, before capping our show for tonight, let's recognize some of the people who made this possible behind the scenes. So, we thank Asian Medical Students Association Philippines, or AMSA Phil, together with AMSA UST, AMSA SOMA, and of course, UP MSSR. We also have our partner organizations from AMSA, Access AMSA, from ASMPH,
We also have AMSA FEU and RMS.
AMSA, UPH, DJG, TMU.
And of course, AMSA UERM.
Don't forget Sama Sanbeda.
And also Sangawad BUCM.
And of course, SBSG, SLM, CCM, WHQM.
And don't forget AMSA ALSA.
And of course, there's also Astra, GCM.
AMSA SA PhD.
AMSA, WVSU.
And DLSU, the Pre-Medical Society.
And last but not the least, Philippine Nursing Students Association, ADU chapter. So that really caps off our health playlist for tonight. So remember to stay safe and keep yourselves and your families secure during this pandemic. So that is our health playlist for tonight. This has been your host, Rem de la Cruz.
And Jam Ponce. And now we are signing off. Thank you so much, guys,
Thank
for
you.
listening.